Life takes odd turns, but even tattered and worn yarn still has value. Tired joints and health flares don't have to stop the journey. Welcome to Hawksong Weaving, where all our paths are a little bit warped. I found an absolute treasure trove of superwash merino wool yarn in this gorgeous pomegranate at my local thrift store. It was mostly in smaller balls of yarn with 2 full skeins that I balled myself. The 2 skeins still had the tag on them, hence my knowing the fiber type for certain, and the whole bundle was in a Ziploc bag at the thrift store for about $10. Sometimes a project will insist on being made. Not a commission project or a planned out project, but the project itself almost wills its way into creation, with the artist acting as a conduit. This project was definitely like that. This stole was very clear on what it wanted it to be, and so Persephone's embrace began. I use this particular type of warping method because I have a genetic collagen disorder, and this is what works for my body. This isn't going to work for everyone's body, but this is what works for my body and, honestly, my wallet. Warping boards can be very, very expensive, and instead being able to use something like a coat rack and being able to keep it in a smaller location and keep my body without bending over too much, yeah, that's what works for me. If this doesn't work for you, that's fine. Take what works and leave the rest. I use terry cloth towels to cushion the warp threads on both ends of the weaving. This helps prevent the finished weaving from being tighter at the ends and looser in the middle, creating a sort of sausage profile. No sausage here, just fabric. The way I warp has me cutting the warp loops at the end of winding the warp. This is what's easiest on my body. It won't work for everyone, but that's okay. This isn't a great angle, but I'm being careful to pay attention to how the warp threads are laying on the back bar of the loom, and the right hand thread goes through the smaller hole in the rigid heddle reed. It's not critical, and some minor mistakes aren't the end of the world, but it does make it easier to keep the tension of the warp threads even across the entire weaving. That being said, superwash merino is also super forgiving, which is why I love working with it when I can find it at the thrift store. Because I have my rigid heddle loom, I'm limited in the immediate width I can weave. For this project I had so much yarn and the stole was so insistent. I did my best to weave 2 equal lengths of this fabric. Overall warping and weaving time took me about 12 hours that was spread across a few days. I want to say thank you for sticking around this long. If you'd like to support my work, please feel free to subscribe or follow. Links to other social media can be found in my bio. Like a lot of things about how I create content, take what works for you and leave the rest. I'm using the leftover yarn to do a whip stitch to sew the 2 panels together. I'm not worrying too much about it being raised. I knew from weaving this yarn that it was fairly forgiving, superwash merino usually is. Once I was done with the whip stitch, I steam ironed the center line, pulling and tugging until the seam settled down. You can see that Penelope Calico is doing her best to be helpful. She's certainly not about to attack my yarn repeatedly, but in her defense, it was humid on the day that I was filming this and the day that I was doing this, and she does not like it when my heart rate gets a little bit wonky due to humidity. I'm so sorry, Penelope darling. I know you would much rather I just sat in my armchair at all times except for when I had to feed you. Now that I've gotten it sewn in the center, I'm binding the edges with a very narrow zigzag stitch, almost an applique. Then the black velvet ribbon will get sewn into place, sort of trapping the raw edges of the stole and providing a weight to help it drape nicely. I really hope that the person who purchases this feels like a dark vampire or an elegant winter fae, keeping warm in Persephone's embrace. This project was so much fun. It's so rare that I get a project that's so very insistent on being made and very particular on how it was made. Thank you for sticking along with this video. I'm so glad for the odd turn your life took that got you here. Thanks for spending time with Hoksong Weaving, where we're all a little bit warped.